it can be a little scary of making the wrong decision.
Unless we get bored. That would be the only reason to do something else different. Boredom. But then we know that's not good.
You should have been doing like what you need to be doing a year ago. So like what you do in 2022, you're probably going to see it until 2023. What you do in 2023, you're probably going to see it until 2024. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Driven. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing what we did in our business for us to be doing a lot better. And the reason why we're discussing this topic is because looking back from the start of the business, you know, we were doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, I mean, we weren't doing as good. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a lot of businesses that we see that are doing similar things that we used to do.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, our experience in kind of like, you know, changing some things and just focusing on some things, I think will help a lot of business or a lot of people for them to actually start doing better in business, both revenue and profitability wise, because that's what we really, you know, focus on at least. And so I feel like, you know, at least our experience and kind of like what we learned will help a lot of other people.
Yeah. And then just at the beginning of the business, you know, when we started this business, I don't think we had an intention to grow it, you know, to the size it is right now.
I think we started with we just want to make some money.
Yeah.
It's like not growing it to like, you know, multi-million-dollar company. It wasn't like we don't really have any goals or purpose. It was just enough to replace our incomes from our jobs and retire our parents. That's pretty much the goal that we had. Retire my parents and, you know, now work at a job. And so we did, like you said, we didn't start off with any big goals or anything. It was just, you know, out of necessity more than anything.
But another thing is we also wanted to pay our debts because during that time, remember from our previous business, we were in the negatives. Like we were really in the negatives.
I think each of us I think we did the math and each one of us was like minus 40K.
40, yeah.
Each around there, you know, with the car loans,
yep.
with the business loans, with the personal loans.
Yeah, and so that's also one of the reasons is just to get out of debt. And I know like during that time we also had jobs, so we would just go to our jobs and then, you know, come back and do the business. And so we would do the business before and then after.
Yeah, I remember those days where it was the day job for 8 hours a day in the morning. And then in the night, I remember those days when we used to do that. Yeah,
and just going back to the topic of this episode, you know, what we implemented or what we did for us to start doing better. I know when we started, we were, you know, working on the business part-time. And, you know, we were just listing the products that we were offering for the vehicles.
And then we at that point, we also had two businesses.
Yeah.
The clothing and the vehicles.
Yeah, so we had a lot of things going on. We had our jobs. We had the previous business, which was the clothing and, you know, like the liquidation items.
Yeah.
And then the current business, which is, you know, working with the automotive films. So we had three things going on at the same time. And I know like doing those three things, so we had to focus a little bit of our time doing one thing and then, you know, going back and forth. So like we were everywhere. We were spread out.
Yeah, and so kind of like, well, just a brief storyline. Mm-hmm. You know, we started off, you know, doing okay. 2019-ish, 2020-ish. And then, you know, the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we started doing, you know, significantly better. And it was just kind of like we were just doing things without really knowing. We were kind of like staying confused, stumbling forward.
Yep.
So we really didn't have too much experience or anything. We just kind of, you could say we kind of got lucky in kind of what it is that we were doing. Mm-hmm. And so the business was just naturally growing, you know.
Yep.
Pre-pandemic, it was growing. And then during pandemic, that's when, because we were primarily in e-commerce, that's when it started like just exploding.
Yep.
So I think a lot of the growth that we did have was just us, you know, just stumbling forward, like, you know, not necessarily knowing exactly what we were doing, but just continue going and going and going. And mm-hmm. luckily they were the right things that we were doing. And yeah, and that's where the business grew. So we really didn't have, you know, or we didn't even understand like specifically as to why the business was growing. It was just, we were just doing things to do things.
Yep.
And luckily we were doing the right things.
Yep.
And then when the pandemic hit, that's just when it all exploded. And so like, I know you mentioned that it wasn't really like a real world.
To an extent, it was inflated.
Yeah. So it wasn't, I mean, it happened, but mm-hmm. it wasn't realistically how things were going to go on yep. for like the next few years. And so as we've learned for mm-hmm. sure. And so, yeah, you know, the business grew, and then, you know, money was being printed, money was created out of thin air. Yep. And so, you know, a lot of businesses benefit. Some of them died, but a lot of businesses like ours benefited from it. Yep. But then once like reality started to hit, that's kind of when we, you know, saw the spike, and then we started seeing the flat line, and then we started seeing a slight decline. Yep. And so at that point, I think it's when we saw, okay, you know, kind of reality hit us, and, you know, maybe we weren't really that good.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like, you know, we were just stumbling forward.
Yep.
And the pandemic.
Yep.
And so I think at that point is when, do you remember that point?
2022?
Yeah, that's when it started hitting.
Yeah, so I remember during that point, like how you mentioned, we were during that pandemic, and, you know, we were staying confused and stumbling forward, like you mentioned. And at that time, we were doing a lot of different things. I know we started doing the carbon fiber parts. We started doing, we got the machine to be able to print decals.
Yeah, the printing.
And, you know, and our core business. So we had, you know, we were trying to do different things. And we were making income. But it was just like, I don't think it was our full potential. Because, you know, we were distracted doing other things. And then come 2022, when, like, people stopped getting the unemployment checks, they stopped getting, you know, help because of the pandemic. You know, sales started dropping. We saw it in our sales.
Yeah, we saw it in the sales. And then, I don't know how often you look at the books, but when you started seeing the sales drop, kind of like, what was going through your mind?
Well, when they were dropped, we were in the negatives. We were in the negatives for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Luckily, you know, we had a good amount of reserves, but we were in the negatives. And so we kind of like, we knew that we had to make some type of change. Because if we continued going the way we were going, we were just eventually, like, we did the math. Like, it was going to take us, like, I think 2 years.
Yeah, for us to completely go out of business.
How did it go? I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember specifically because I feel like I tend to worry a lot more. I tend to, and I think to an extent it's good and bad. Because bad being because, you know, I tend to stress myself out more. Maybe that's why I have a lot more white hairs. Like, I have a lot more white hairs. But then I think good because it kind of to a point it keeps me like paranoid of certain things. Like, yep. I when I look at numbers, it kind of like worries me. Kind of like it doesn't worry me. It more like I kind of like have that feeling of like just like not change. I can't explain that feeling, but I don't know if you've seen some of the things like I when there's an issue or there's a problem, like, you know, when the Amazon account was suspended and things like that, I just tend to like just hyper focus on certain things and just I guess try to solve the problem. And so I remember those times, you know, we thought adding a shop would add revenue, doing different things might add revenue. But I think the one thing that we forgot to see was that what was working for us at the beginning and kind of like what we had built our business on, you know, what we're really good at. And then we started, you know, reading books, you know, the Good to Great, you know, that's when, you know, one of the things that helped us see that, you know, focus was super important. And then later on, we just came across Alex Hormozi. And I think one of the things that as to why we kind of listened to him more than, or understood him more than the other things is because, for one, I think he knows how to articulate it. Right. And then the other one is because he gave like real life examples as to like, you know, what he did in his businesses to kind of like grow them. Right. Because, you know, there's a lot of people out there that, you know, a lot of things that say, you know, you should be doing this, and this, and kind of like they might be seeing the right things. Right. But it's kind of hard to understand without any context of it. Like, no real world examples of, you know, of their own personal business, you know, as to them applying it in their businesses. And so, but once he came across, like, and then I saw him, you know, and then I pretty much, you know, went through all his content and I'm like, oh shit, it makes sense. And it kind of, in my head, it kind of like, to a certain extent, it kind of not clicked, but I was like, it made sense. And then that's when we started doing like, you know, these are the different things that we can be doing to grow the business. So we kind of like got rid of, at that point, I think we got rid of everything, like the shop and everything. Yep. And just focus on our e-commerce. And so that's when we did the, you remember the board? It was a whiteboard. And we listed out everything that we could do to grow the business, increase the profitability. And so that's the first thing that we started off with. Yep. And so it was around not late 2022, but around third quarter of 2022 when we started doing that. And the reason why was because the sales were dropping. Yep. The sales were dropping. But then I don't know if you remember that board of, you know, different things that we started doing.
So I do remember that board. And during that time, you know, like after we decided, okay, you know, we should just cut everything off. So we cut everything off and we just focused on our main e-commerce business. And then from there, we made a list of, okay, you know, 1, we got to create more products. 2, like our marketing has to be better. Maybe we need to start improving the marketplaces, because I know we were selling on Amazon, eBay, Etsy. So that's its own marketplace. But then we also had our website. That's a different channel. And so we were kind of like going from each channel, seeing how we could better it, seeing how we could do more social media, seeing how we could start doing email marketing. People like reaching the website but not checking out, seeing how we could target them, seeing, like just SEO, seeing how we could just fine tune every single little detail. And that's how we started from, I think it was December. And then, like come January. But then I know starting January, we just started like really focusing on creating new products. And, just having that focus little by little, that's what started, having that jump in sales.
Yeah, and I remember that time because and even at that point where we made the whiteboard and made everything that we could do to better the business. Even at that point, I think we didn't fully understand. But then once it hit January, kind of like we had to think of like, okay, well, why did the business grow? We kind of really had to evaluate why did the business grow. And so really looking back, there were certain spurts of growth in the business, and they all happened after we kind of listed, or we added more products to our inventory. So, just focusing on, just not just increasing the inventory to increase the inventory, but I know we had like vehicle specifics, and so we focused on a certain vehicle, and then, and so it kind of like, with that, maybe it might be getting to specifics, but the growth that we saw came from like, and the short spurts of growth that we saw came from, just doing that one thing. And so remembering that, I think that's when we focused on January. Like I remember January-ish. I'm like, you know what? Like, we just gotta, and we also delegated some of that stuff to other individuals, and maybe that was a mistake because the growth of the business is our responsibility. And so I think that was a mistake because we had tried that. Not that we had tried that. We were doing that for like 3 months. Different things. Learning ads, this and that. But and we delegated a lot of the stuff, and so I know that task was delegated to someone else. And so and that's also another thing that we learned, that the growth and the revenue and pretty much everything in that sense of the business is the responsibility of the founder or the owner or the people in charge of it. And that's something that, at least as you're growing or starting off, it shouldn't be like, you should still have a strong focus in it. And so seeing that, kind of remembering back, and then I think that's when in January we decided to, let's do this. And let's focus on it, because that's doing that in the past, growth followed afterwards. And so we started doing that in January, and then we just continued doing it and using the growth of the business.
And just looking back, kind of like to give a little bit of detail or context with the numbers. I know in 2022, 7 out of the 12 months we did negative. And so like we saw that we started doing everything in December, and then come January, that's when we hit a profit, because I know January for us, like based on our previous years, tends to be in the negatives. So I know that January we did 5 figures, which is like minimum 1,000. No, 4 figures. 4 figures, which is minimum 1,000. I know we did that in January. We did that also in...
in January it's 5 figures, right?
5 figures.
Very low 5 figures.
So that was minimum like 10,000. So 5 figures in profit. So we did that January. February we did 4 figures, which is minimum 1,000. And I know March we did another 4 figures, right?
5 figures.
5 figures. And then come April, May, and June, we did mid 5 figures. So I know, like, and that's just to give a little bit of context that what you start doing, you're not going to see the results until like later on. So, and that's something I've come to realize, like in business, if you want to get to a certain stage, you should have been doing like what you need to be doing like a year ago. So like what you do in 2022, you're probably going to see it until 2023. What you do in 2023, you're probably going to see it until 2024. So it's just feeding the pipeline of, like activities, results, like output. and then like at the end of the pipeline you're gonna see the results.
Yeah, and it's a latent effect. And so like a lot of the times it may seem like the thing that you're doing is not resulting in anything, but one of the things that we learned is patience, because we were doing it in January, we didn't see too much. February, not too much. March, we started seeing some things, but one of the things that we thought is, okay, maybe it's tax season. April hit, and we saw, okay, there was still growth. May hit, and there was still growth. And so that at that point, it's like tax season was kind of over, but then we were still seeing the growth. And then April, May, and then June, we still saw significant numbers. And so at that point, it wasn't tax season or anything like that, or anything out of the ordinary, because even then, like the car industry that we're in, or the automotive industry that we're in, it's still kind of doing not the best. And so in spite of that, we're still growing and doing better.
Just to kind of like summarize everything, I know for us, like the few things that we needed to change was having that focus, not being distracted, doing carbon fiber parts, doing actual like car parts, doing printed stuff. So having that focus, and then also having that patience, because it took us like 3-4 months to see the fruit of our labors. So like for us, I think that's pretty much all we needed, just that focus and that patience. Yeah, and I have a question for you. I know that's what we needed to change, but like, do you think this is what we're gonna like continue doing, or like what do you think the direction of the business is? Like, are we gonna continue focusing on this? Are we gonna? Because I know like in business it's kind of like, and I've come to realize that in business it's kind of hard to know when to make decisions. So I guess like, I mean, if you don't have like the answer or whatever, like, do you think we're going to continue doing this in the business? Do you think we're going to, change something else, focus on another thing? Or are we going to, hire more people? Or
yeah, so just looking at it pragmatically, and it comes also from listening to other people that have had businesses, like, Lex or Mosey. Like, you probably had to keep, he says, keep doing it for like a long time, keep doing the things working. And so like the thing that we've been doing has been working for us. And so at the moment, like right now, it's continuing to work for us. And so I don't think that there would be a need to change, but obviously as time progresses, if we see like, and that comes with also just looking at your business, looking at the numbers, looking at outside factors, like I think for right now, unless we make or we want something else, let's say, in the foreseeable future, just continue doing the same thing over and over, and just continue doing it. I think that's something we're just gonna continue doing it, and as time passes, we see like the results and whatnot, or we see like if we want to something different or change. Aside from like the changes that we personally would want, or outside factors, or something happens with e-commerce or something like that, I think in the foreseeable future we're gonna be continue doing the same thing, repeatedly, better and faster than everyone else. And so because we've seen like we've passed I feel like we've passed the competition like significantly. At least are in a small niche. So we were still kind of like towards the top, but now with the continuous just focusing and just pushing towards that the thing that we've been doing, it's just kind of pushed us way ahead, way ahead. And so at least from the top of my head, that's something that maybe it makes sense. Like it doesn't make sense to do something else. It doesn't, unless we want unless we get bored. That would be the only reason to do something else different, boredom. But then we know that's not good, just doing the boring stuff over and over again. And so at least right now, until we talk and see, like, I think it'll be continue doing the same. And
just looking back at everything, it's like it's a whole process of experimenting, doing one thing and then seeing if it works or not, and failing, and constantly doing that, because we don't know like if this we kind of have an idea that this is the right direction because of the results, but then we don't know 100% sure like if we're actually doing the right direction to take the business. So I know like in the beginning we had that too, like, man, are we doing the right thing? Like, should we be doing something else? And I think that's what led us to like trying different things. And I think it's like it goes back to a lack of knowledge. Just continuously researching, improving yourself, and like that's gonna show in your business. And I think another thing too is it can be a little scary of making the wrong decision. And I know like we see that day in day out, like with like the people we work with. It's just like, man, I don't want to mess up, but I think that's just a part of business.
Yep.
And yeah, I think we're just gonna continue that.
We're just gonna continue doing the boring stuff.
Yep.
And I think if there's one thing to get out of this is, there's things that you do in your business, or there's things that we've done in our business that work. They may be boring, but we just gotta continue doing them over and over and over again. And so I think that this one thing is just doing the boring stuff, and focus is super important. And doing what works. Yep. Because I know a lot of times it can get boring. Yep. But I think in some situations, like, business doesn't necessarily have to be like fun. Yep. You just have to do the boring stuff. Like the competition is great, and all other aspects of the business, they can be like fun and stuff like that. But the main work, I think, to an extent, is kind of boring. Yep. And so I think people shouldn't, or we shouldn't, strive, or kind of like how do I say it? Strive away, or we shouldn't put our attention somewhere else. And so
but I know it took us a while to kind of understand that.
Yep.
So I would say for everyone else that if try different things until you see something that's working, and just stick with it.
Pretty much that's what it is. Focus, what got us to doing a lot better in our business.
So this was just a summary of what we did in our business from the beginning to now, so we could start doing better. And just to summarize everything, it's just focus, patience, and doing the boring work. And once you figure that out, like, your business is gonna be, it's not gonna be doing well, because it may not be doing well for other people.
I feel like it'll be, in general, like, it'll be in a better position than when you're not focusing.
Yeah, because principles are pretty much the same. Because if you look at sports, like like in soccer, you like, remember when we were doing the soccer, we were just focusing on like one touch, like 100 reps.
Yep.
Until we got better.
Yep.
Like mastering the touch. So I think it's just, I don't know, it's similar to sports.
It's very similar. And I think the principles of success apply, go across different like industries and platforms and, sports, personal life.
Yeah, they're very similar. Because even working out is like, perfect example. Working out, that you could work out for 6 months, you're not going to see anything. Like, it's very hard and it's very slow. So like, you had to put up the work up front to be able to see results, like, at the end of the pipeline.
Yep.
It's very similar. And so just focusing on one thing. Because like, also with working out, like, if you focus on different exercises, if you want to do like strength, and then the next week you do hypertrophy, and then the next week you do like Olympic lifting, and then you do calisthenics, like, you're probably not going to get to your goal. So, damn, it is similar. Yep. But yeah, it's just focus, patience, doing the boring work, and there's a high likelihood of you doing better in business. Yeah. Yeah, but with that being said, I mean, unless you have anything else. No. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Alexis.
And my name is Juan.
And we'll see you on the next video.